Welcome back to another episode, maybe. And the topic I'm going to talk about today. If you would have asked me yesterday, I promise you this was not on the radar. Um, but I I feel like coming out of the closet in my own way. So let's do that. So we as humans, as a civilization, we have always tended to group together, to uh, those with common traits typically, start gravitating towards others with those same traits. And I mean that that works out. I mean, it's a beautiful thing if you think about uh, the friends, your friend circle. You think about the people you talk to at work, and in the end, you're going to find that for the most part, these individuals have a lot of similarities or things, likes, interest in common with you. That's just that's how we do it, And I think that a joining together that many times many times breaks this rule, or this pattern is marriage. And I don't know why it is. Maybe it's because we underlying we like a challenge. No, I don't know. But they say opposites attract. Well, they're not necessarily talking like you and your buddy. They're not. The saying's not talking about you and your coworker. You're not attracted to the person at work that is most not like you. It's referring to marriage. And so that is, that is a case where we tend to deviate. You know, I'm not saying you can't have anything in common. I mean, everyone's got stuff in common with their spouses, but as a whole, if you kind of look, you're like, well, I do this, she does this, I like this. She actually really likes this instead, and yeah, you go down the line, and it's you would think it's a recipe for disaster, but it it seems to happen a lot. Like, it's pretty common, and it works. Obviously it's working. Uh, so I don't know. Why do I say that? Why do I start out talking about groups and associations uh, and the sorts, why? Because it's important. It gives us validation. You know, it it's it surrounds us with other like-minded, like-interested individuals. That's gonna be a win for everyone. For advancement. And I discovered I I'm pretty bad at time. I really am. But I discovered that I was part of a group that I didn't realize I was part of. And I mean, a lot of the signs were there, a lot of the comments were there, but I didn't get the pin, to wear, saying, "Hey, I'm part of this group," if you will. I didn't know, and I didn't wear it proudly. uh, and I'd never thought about it, you know, nor did I know a group of that there was a group for me to be in until one of the hospital stays I was at, and or as I like to say, the clink, when I was in the clink, and there was a really short, kind of heavier set, a gal there, and she got around with a walker. She required a walker, and you know most of the time in the clink there's not people in uh, wheelchairs or walkers. I mean, it would be really rare because one, I mean, the walker could possibly be used to hurt herself, or we could hurt ourselves with just the walker, so they wouldn't normally allow that, but that was the case this time, and man, I'll tell you, everybody, you'll hear me say this. Some people are like, oh man, you got it bad, and I'm like, man, we all have our burdens to bear, our cross to carry, and I am absolutely convinced that you cannot compare the um, the trial, the trauma, that one experience, and compare it to another one's trauma, and say, oh, they've had it bad, and this person, yeah, their trauma wasn't that bad. I feel like I'm allowed to say this, of living in this for this many years, and just hundreds of people that I've been in the clink with, and seen their stories, that it's a lot more about how, I don't want a person to sound weak. It's a lot more about how the trauma affects or burdens the individual. And one trauma, one type of trauma is going to rock somebody's world, and the other person's going to be like, well, I've been exposed to worse. Not like bragging, just in their mind, I've been exposed to worse, and they're gonna immediately downplay or squash the exact same event that is just an absolute monster for another. And it's, and I kind of hit on that right there. But when I said this other person, when they had more like experiences, more traumas, more whatever, then they just have a much broader view, that they can compare to, and so you see this a lot. In fact, this is one of the reasons that I'm the way I am today, and that is, as a general rule of thumb, those who are younger are going to be more affected by an event versus somebody who is just has more time, age, wisdom, experience, exposure, whatever you want to say. And I think most people would already say, yeah, well, yeah, no, yeah, I get that, and you can think about in your own life, and you look, and back when you're whatever in your teens, and you had whatever tragedy you got you're living at home and you got a speeding ticket, and oh, mom and dad, and I don't know, I'm not trying to be a drama queen, but I just want to die, versus having to have that conversation. And yet you have other people will get the same speeding ticket for even faster, or whatever, and they're like, well, that's the third one I've got this year. I'm not saying that's right either, but I think you kind of see my point is one of the man. I'm getting way off topic, but I will get back to and you don't know what my topic is, so you don't know that I've drifted a little bit, but on the same conversation, the same thing that we're talking about, this trauma exposure is that's where the damage can happen. That's where real damage can happen, is traumas at a young age, okay, that you're just not equipped. You're not equipped to process. They most definitely can do damage in the moment and lasting. I hate to say permanent, but I mean, quite honestly, that's the truth. Permanent damage from the events. I had a pastor, and he's super smart, and we were talking about trauma, and I knew the concept already. I knew how you store it. I can't remember what side of the brain, but basically, when something's too heavy to process, when you can't compute it, can't work through it, the survival mechanism is to stuff it, okay, and we kind of stuff it. I believe in the back of our brain. I can't remember I won't say it's one side or the other. Well, I'm sure it's one side over the other. And that's actually what they do for a treatment is they do a light therapy, and they get you kind of really relaxed, just kind of put your guard down, if you're not hypnotized, but you're relaxed, and you will say stuff. They say you won't, but you will say stuff you would not normally say, and what they do is they get you to that relaxed state, and you start processing, or you start talking about these traumatic events they're locked on that side of the brain, whatever side. I'd have to look it up again, but they're locked up for your protection. You start talking about them, and it brings them to the surface. It takes the condom off of them. They're not protected anymore. They're up, and you're dealing with them. Because what is interesting, I guess, is where we stuff those memories, those tragic deals. They cannot be processed in the storage unit. When they're in that storage area, they can't be processed, and therefore I feel kind of safe to say they're there to you stop breathing. But once they get you starting to talk about them, it brings them up, and I believe the mechanics of it is it brings it over to the other hemisphere of the brain, and there you can process it. It's going to get real. It's going to get raw. It's not walled off or protected anymore. It's there, and you with some counseling can chew through and process that event, and it kind of breaks it up into more manageable pieces that are not so heavy. I'm not going to say that it makes it go away. It's like, oh, it's gone. No, but it It's very effective. I did it for a couple of years for some of my, I always get it wrong, post traumatic stress syndrome. Yeah, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. But hey, the pastor was, man, he was kind of a counselor. I don't know if he had a degree, but he didn't need it. He was well, well read, and not only was he well read, he had the exposure, the life experience, and most importantly, he was wired for the position, like whatever it is, empathy and all he had that. Like if you didn't have that, the other two variables, not going to work. But I remember him one time, as I babble on about him. But I remember one time we were talking about this exact thing, this trauma, and really at any age, but I think specifically we were talking about younger ages, trauma that happens to children. And I don't know, like, if this is the truth, I don't know. I didn't look it up, but what it did is it resonated with me. It made sense to me, and it's pretty much what I just got done telling you. But that is what he said is when a child experiences a trauma that they just don't have the facilities to process, to deal with. The body's coping mechanism is to stuff it away or wall it off and for protection, which is why I already told you. But the part he had at the end was kind of like a ray of hope. It's there until they mature and they have exposures to life and experiences, and I believe the short of it was he said the tools to process the event. We're protected until we have the tools to deal with it. Seems like a good deal. First thing, stop the bleeding. So back to the lady at the walker, which I totally digressed. She was Native American. I don't know if I had said that yet, but she was Native American. So she was an oddball. She stuck out, obviously. And nobody have a walker. There's usually not really, really old people. And when I say old, I don't know, as I'm getting older. She was probably in her 60s, but you usually don't see that in the clink. And in Iowa, you rarely see a real Native American. And she, there was no question. You looked at her, she looked Native American. And she shared, when we're in those sessions or whatever, she shared what was going on, with her and her situation. And I although they would never connect to who, what, or what I'm saying, I'm not going to share, but it was heavy. It was really heavy, and it involved her son. And this lady, she was so proud of her son. She was so proud of her son, and I kind of gathered, like, basically, I don't know if they came off the reservation or whatever, but or however it works, but I kind of gathered that she or where she came from not much, and then now her son, this fast generational wise, I guess he's just super super smart, and she would share about it, and it was fascinating, and she was just so proud of his accomplishments, and she had different stats and stuff, but what she was talking about, and this is mine, I took a long way to get to this. What she was talking about is something called, and I don't even know if I'm going to say it right, Mensa. Mensa, I think it was. I had no idea what that was, but the boy her kid got accepted into Mensa at whatever age, and she had all the stats, and it sounded like a pretty big deal. And I remember, other than what she could tell me about it, I didn't know, and nor could I look up while I'm in the clink anything on it. But when I got out, I did look it up. What is Mensa? Well, Mensa is like a group, like I was talking about earlier, this group. It's a group of really smart people. Really smart people. Like, usually they're the ones in the news kind of thing. And I thought to myself, because I feel, and I'll share this in a bit, but I feel not from a place of arrogance or anything, but I feel I don't know what the word would be, knowledgeable. I feel I'm very knowledgeable, and very little of it came from school, school settings. And I did do a couple practice tests and stuff. I'm telling you, there's a reason why that group is pretty small. So life goes on, and I'm not going to be taking any tests for Mensa to find out just how not smart I am. But I don't know how many years ago it was, I came across a different term, a different group for me to be in, or maybe be in. And that is, and I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's polymath. So POLYMATH, polymath. It's kind of a weird branding, but it's what they're called. And polymath is different, than being able to do Mensa. I'm sure you could be Mensa and be a polymath, but just because you're polymath, you're probably not, Mensa level. So I get looking. What is this? What is this polymath, and what is it about? What are the requirements, right? And that every club has a requirements to get in, and one of them is like lifelong learning. This desire to learn. Another requirement that is unique to it is it's over a vast or broad amount of topics. See, you could be Mensa and play the flute or whatever it would be, just rock it out and be super super good at only math, and like pass the test and be Mensa because you're just stupid smart. But you're not a polymath in that case, because you don't have that broad learning. And but there's more to it than just a broad learning. It also requires the ability to find, I guess I've always kind of said this way, find connections with what would appear to be unrelated items, unrelated topics, if you will. And just how one would interact or could interact or should interact with another. And I'm like, oh man, checkmate. I do that one too. Like I've been doing that for ever. So there's a few other requirements, but that's for the most part the gist of it, and yeah, and so it felt good. It felt good to finally have a title for my, I don't want to say suffering, years of suffering, learning, because they weren't suffering. Like man, it's you have those directly around me my dedication to learning, but it's kind of relentless at times. And but yeah, I guess, like I said, I'm coming out of the closet. I'm putting on my pen, my polymath, pen on my chest here, and so yeah, let's talk about what that looks like in my life. What is that? And maybe we'll start with why I think it happened. Why did I have this? Because it started at a very, very young age. Why did I have this desire for learning? And I'll tell you, it was not in the classroom setting. Like I sucked at school. It was boring. It was too slow. It was they focused on the unimportant details, in my opinion. We take history for example. This is when I realized this is I remember the day that I knew, how do I want to say it? Not that I was different, but I remember the day that I knew, in my opinion, the current learning system is broken, absolutely broken. And the class that just enlightened me to this is history. I still remember which way the desk faced in the room. I remember where the teacher's desk was in relationship to my room. I remember where the window was. Thank goodness I was close to it so I could just daydream out into the vast nothingness. But they were, teacher was handing out the tests that we had taken, and my score sucked. It, like, yeah, you might as well make a paper airplane out of that test. But I looked down and I'm like, well, what I get wrong? This is this was a type of test where it's your handwriting on it. The original question's there. You can see, what you circled, so it kind of takes you right back to the moment you took the test. So I'm looking down and I'm kind of drifting back into the moment that I took the test. And the type of questions that I got wrong versus the type of questions I got right, I noticed a similarity. And the similarity was, useless dates, and in my opinion, useless names. So we'll take history for example. What do you what do you the audience think? I might be wrong. I could be wrong on this, but we're in history class. We're teaching this in high school. What is the purpose of a statement that says on this date? Now it didn't have the time, but it might as well have the time. This date, this year, so and so did XYZ. If we were to look at that sentence and we look at it as it relates to us 10 or 20 years down the road, if we look at it as value, value added or not value added, do you think really that it's important that I know, March 12th of 1910 or something? How's that? How is that ever short of Jeopardy? Which, like I said, it's useless. How's that going to be of value? That date, maybe. Okay, maybe. And then we'll go to the name. It was always funny because the names were always the names are always like if their mom was mad at them, written out. It had first name and if there was like surnames and middle names and last name, it was ridiculous. So back to that sentence, we have that exact moment in time. We have the exact name, legal name of this individual, minus his social security number, I guess. And then we have the story, the accomplishment, or what happened, what good or bad event took place. Is how much value is it that I know, the exact name? I'm sorry, but I say little. But what, in my opinion, has the value is the meat of the sentence. Because if we look at any of these sentences, what are these accomplishments for these historical events that they're wanting to, wanting to instill us, it's not really even the sentence. It's the events surrounding the sentence. Let's say it this way. How was it before? How was it going through it? And how is it afterwards? To me, that's the meat and potatoes that I can use, because there's a lesson there that when you take it to that level, like I just did, when you have, what do you want to call it? I want to say the learning example. Man, someone out there is just like, say this, it's this. I'm a lack of vocabulary for this, but the lesson. What is it's the lesson that is valuable. It's a lesson. Why? So we don't repeat it again. I don't need to know. I don't need to. I'm not saying we don't need to, but I don't need to glorify an individual. I don't have to worship some magical date and draw a line in the universe of time to get the value. Now, is the date important? Kind of. Do I need to know it's on Tuesday? No. Do I need to know, even the month? I'm probably not important. Do I even need to know the year? Someone might argue yes. But in my opinion, having the 30,000 foot view is enough. You know, for example, I can't tell you the years of a particular war, but I know we had steel pennies in 42-ish. Okay. And why did we have steel pennies? Because of the war efforts. Because they needed the metal for the war. I have a range. Do I need to know the date it started? No. Do I need to know who puffed up their chest first and rubbed nipples with another individual to get this thing started? No. It's more as a whole. What can be value added? I need the value added portions of this this deal. What's going to help me in the future? What's going to help my children in the future? What can I gain out of this knowledge to help, not me, but just what can we learn as humanity from the event? Yeah. And if it was so and so, climbed this hill and stuck a flag in the whatever on this date, what is the important part? The important part, in my opinion, is probably the flag. It's either symbolizing the end of basically victory, or it might be symbolizing taking ground, like staking. I conquered this ground. It's going to be value added to say, hey, there was kind of an uprising or strengthening, But do I need to know it was on Thursday? I'm kind of poking fun, but I hope you see my learning and what I do. Okay, so an interesting fact, a couple of interesting facts. You guys probably already know this, because I don't know what people know and don't know. But man, my learning takes me everywhere. My topics are so vast. I always say I don't pick the topics. they pick me. And but I do have to like or enjoy the topic, because otherwise it sucks. But back to that war. I don't even know which one it is. Like World War II. I can honestly tell you I can't tell you who we were fighting, and I kind of feel bad for that, as respect for. But I know some. I do store away unique information, especially when it applies to changes, like what took place. And yes, I'm not making light of the sacrifice those men, and, as I'm about to say, women made in that effort. No, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying there's other things, good or bad. There's other things. And it's kind of interesting, because I'm not into music. I can barely push the play button, for audio. That's just not been my gift. I do enjoy it, but not weird. Like, I sit down and listen to some piano music for. Not that that's weird if you do it, but yeah. So, but I have found kind of a love for watching. About guitars, and I have no desire to get a guitar or anything like that, but the guitar and playing the guitar is very fascinating. And man, some of the really good artists it's a part of their body, when they're as one. But the particular thing that I learned the other day, and when I say the other day, I don't remember when the other day is. I just always say the other day, is Gibson. And I think most people know of Gibson guitars. They're super, super famous, and there's all these unique years and serial numbers, and man, these boys know the facts. And so and so worked there at this time, and his signature is on it. But what is interesting is that I don't know if you guys all know how a guitar is constructed. I can tell you I don't know the names of all the parts. I would slaughter it, but I feel I could probably build a guitar. I'm not saying it's gonna be awesome, but I feel like I could build a guitar without opening a book or like looking back to videos, just with how I've watched a lot. I mean, hundreds of guitar, ukulele. I can't think of what some of them other wood instruments are called, but anyway, the some of you guys are going to know exactly, like, just say this word again, But you have the neck or the bridge, the neck, the part with the strings where they're doing da-da-da-da-da-da with their hands. And, I think most of them have 5 strings, 4 or 5. And, they tighten them things up. That's how they get them to sound like they do, and get the notes that they want. And so a lot of that guitar's life is spent with a tremendous amount of tension, kind of pulling it like a taco, if you will, pulling it, collapsing it inward. And so what's hidden inside of pretty much every guitar is this chunk of metal, okay, like a piece of ready rod or whatever, I don't know. And what it does is it goes up that neck a ways, quite a ways, and then it goes down quite a ways. I think it stops or goes wherever it fattens out and bulks up and hooks onto the body. But that piece of metal, they set a preload on it, so they tighten that, okay, and then they tighten it, and then they glue the back on it, like the covering. So as far as I know, the only way you can get at that is you got to kind of like, and these guys are good, but you got to tear that thing apart. You got to get the glue apart. You got to be able to adjust that or whatever you would do. But otherwise, it's kind of like the guy that's out of sight and he's just doing his job. And what he's doing is he's providing tension on the backside, so it's counteracting the strings of the guitar. So well, anyway, I'm giving you a guitar lesson, only to come to this. Let's get back to the war. You know that there is, I think, I want to say 3 years, maybe 5 years. Once again, does it really matter that I know on Thursday it took place? But Gibson didn't put that in because our government. I'm not saying Gibson didn't want to do it on their own. I think this was, if there was any war where there was unity, in my opinion. I'm not saying there was no one against it, but that's a precious thing about that particular war. There was just a beautiful uniting of our country for a cause. But remember, I don't know if it was on Thursday. But the government basically went to all these different manufacturers throughout the United States and said, "Hey, what can you do for the war effort? What can you do? What can you provide? What can you do?" And Gibson wasted no time, and they removed that bar. for, like I said, 3 or 5 years. And you can't just remove the bar. I mean, it was there for a reason. So the neat thing, I guess, if you look at those particular guitars, and they claim they're still comfortable, the people who've played them, but the neck or whatever, the thing, it's bulkier. Like it's not as sexy as some of the other ones, not as dainty, which a lot of times can be hard on the wrist and fingers, as you have to clutch around to play the strings. And anyway, they not only did they beef up the neck, that I'll call it the adapter, the chunk. It's so beautiful. They put this like V dovetail joint into the body, of all these guitars. But they bulked. They seriously bulked that connection up. Why? They needed to have enough. They had to have enough rigidity in those guitars to offset the fact that there's no steel tension rod in it. And I don't know how many guitars Gibson made, but I know it had to add up. I mean, it had to be a measurable amount of steel that could be used to build whatever, bullets and tanks and guns, and and I don't know, is that part important to history, or is it just a stupid fact? I don't know. Now I'm going to stay on this topic because this is exactly what a polymath does. Okay, is makes these connections to other things that are somewhat unrelated. You might go, well, that's related. Well, not if I just said, hey, Gibson guitar and this, and we didn't talk about would you have a story? So that is it. But I've often talked about this particular war in our financial literacy class. Me and my wife, we teach financial literacy, and one of the topics that we have to get into is the some of the changes that happened in America on Thursday. And one of those changes, okay, as it relates to money and the economy in the United States, is that war. That war. Why? Because prior to that, most women were in the house. They were housewives. It's not a bad thing. They I don't want to say they loved it, but that is how it worked. End of discussion. That was it. And the men, prior to being in a war, worked at the factories. That's how that worked. That was the rules. Hi, honey, you're home. Here's a pot roast I made. Go ahead, take a load off. Put your feet up. Let me get you a cool glass of Coca-Cola. Was that around then? Probably, but anyway. So what does this have to do with the war? Man, it's crazy, but the war took all the dudes, like all of them. Like I don't think there was any dudes left in America. Like, we got serious about this. Everybody went. Well, that's okay. So what the hell do you do with that? Tom used to go to work in a factory, and now he's off at a war. What's the factory do if the factory is still producing its original product? Because a lot of factories, a lot of them, Not only did they, I don't want to say skimp or adapt on materials, they started making war components, things needed for the war, you know, all of them. You go right down to the list. Here's the thing. You want to talk about history and the importance of history. I don't need to know the date for that, and you, in my opinion, don't need to know the date either. Because here's one of the lessons. I don't know how old you are. I know how old I am. I'm basically 50 years old, and I can look back, and there's been some wars, but never has America been a ghost town void of men. No, we send a few. I don't want to say a few, but you know what I mean? There's dudes at home. A lot of them yet. But that wasn't the case on this particular war. And I don't know what to make of that. But that's kind of cool. So this is the crazy thing. The women took off their aprons, left them on the kitchen table, and clocked in, and she clocked in Tom's place. She went right to work, either making a war needed item, or she kept an existing item like Gibson guitars still coming off the production line. Okay, so why does that matter? I don't know why it matters. But here's what's cool. Some of the most desirable Gibson guitars, and I'm not saying for all collectors, but for some, were the all women made, series or whatever you call them. They loved them. They loved the way they sound. They loved the quality. People just rave about them. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, seriously, think about that in this day and age. Doesn't happen. It ain't gonna happen because it's all turned around anyway. But wow, man, there should have been an American flag hanging out the front of every one of those stinking factories. You talk about buy-in. That was buy-in. We weren't divided. No, I'm not saying nobody was. I mean, there's always, you know what I mean? There's this is war is stupid, and the reason, yeah. That in my opinion is never my that's not my job to make that decision. I don't have that degree. I don't have that training. I don't have that's above, as they say, my pay grade. But I can see a unity, an absolute unity, like never before. These women stepping up and doing this. So, I mentioned it, so I might as well finish the thought because I'm rambling. Why do we teach this, or why do we talk? Why does this topic come up in our financial literacy training that we offer? Well, here's why. The men at war, right? Okay. The women are at the factories. she didn't get paid when she wore the apron in the kitchen. I'm not saying she wasn't of value. I'm not even going there. But she wasn't getting a paycheck, a real sizable paycheck, But now she was. And she didn't do this for like 6 weeks or 6 months. No, it's years. And that moment in time completely changed America. I have my feelings on it. In some ways, it was good. And in other ways, it was bad. But it was definitely it was an event. Like, should we learn from that event? Or should I know on Thursday, 2 guys from opposing armies or whatever, stuck their chests out and rubbed nipples together, and the war started on that day? I don't know. And the funny thing is, this is the way I think, and I am not saying it's right. It's just the way it is. I can't tell you which war that was. I want to say 2. I don't know, but I could look it up. I could look it up in like 10 seconds. If it mattered, but I could do this for probably 10 hours talking about all the different things that I have learned and how it relates back to that war, how it influenced it, how it affected it. But that is my issue with history class. I don't know if you there is a comment section. I have don't be mean, like, hey, you know what, you're an idiot, you just blabbed on. No, you could say that, whatever. But hey, seriously, put in the comments. What do you think? What do you think about that particular history question type? What's your opinion? Now remember, if you leave a comment, you got to do it on Thursday, so I can remember when you did it, because it's important. So, all right, well, that was fun. So, coming out of the closet, branding. I'm branding, and I didn't even share that. This is definitely a topic that could be talked about, more. But that's me. I'm a polymath.